It's the Afterglow. TJ Brassel, our producer. I'm Yogi Roth. That was Bill Hancock. We've had some really powerful guests on this show before. Coaches, players, storytellers, personalities. We've never had somebody who, in my opinion, oversees all of college football.
Yeah.
He may not pull all the strings in college football because we know media and, as he referenced in the dialogue, the commissioners are running the event of the CFP, but I mean, he's the guy.
Yeah.
So what did you take away from our conversation with a guy who I just tremendously respect and have enjoyed getting to know over the years?
Yeah, no, he absolutely is. He's the guy of college football. I know that it was so fun to hear his insight, hear his take, and like you pointed out during the episode, so much knowledge. Like executive director of the BCS, executive director of the CFP. Like he was an executive or was running the NCAA tournament for men's basketball. So it's like what he's seen and what he's helped put together is just wild. One of the things that like I had so many questions, and also there was so much you and I discussed before that like we didn't have time to get to, like that we could still be going for forever. That we didn't even talk much about like his story because that's a whole separate episode itself. But one of the things when he said it, what you said it, and then when he talked about it, about him being the first employee of the CFP and like growing it, I was thinking like, how daunting is that? I mean, at that point, he'd been through so much, maybe not that daunting, but like thinking now to what the CFP is and being the first person to grow it, like that's a lot of pressure because when it was announced it was happening, everyone was like, yes, we're done with the BCS. Like, thank you. And then he's like, all right, how do I make this better? And like he pointed out, regardless when you move to 12 teams or NCAA tournament, when you move to 64, now 68 teams, that team that gets left out is still mad. Like there's always controversy. No one's ever going to be happy. But the questions I think I had for him based solely off of what was discussed here, because we could ask him questions all day. I think there's three main ones. One, and you might know answers to some of these. One is when they're discussing, when they're voting, like, is he in that room or is he just kind of running everything? So that's question one. I'll get through all three, and then if you know answers, you can just hit me with them. So
I got you.
One. Is he in the room? Actually, I guess there's only two. The second one is each committee, like they always talk about how each committee is different. Like they have their criteria, but like some committees put more emphasis into this criteria or in this criteria and stuff like that. But how do you, like, you still need them to be kind of consistent. Otherwise it's like, it's a new thing every year and no one really knows what you're supposed to be going for. So how does a committee make that committee their own, but stay consistent with committees in the past? And then the third one wasn't even a question that I had. It was just, I thought it was a fantastic question by you that I'd never thought about, was about all the controversy this year. Does that make people being on the committee, is it less attractive to want to be on the committee and make that like almost less prestigious? I love that question. I want to know, obviously we know what he thinks. I want to know what your thoughts are on that. But those are my three biggest thoughts and takeaways of that fantastic conversation.
I love that. This is like TJ Brassel on overtime in in the Afterglow here. Okay, question number one: is he in the room? Yes. Is he in there 100% of the time? I'm sure there's fires or there's things that he has to manage and deal with running the event. Yeah. But in my mock exercise, which is the only experience I have, and I've talked to members that have sat in that room for years, yeah, he's very present. Okay. And he's really thoughtful. I mean, think of all the answers he gave us. Like his background, he's like a PR guy. Like he understands media. He understands media better than you and I could dream of understanding media. So I appreciated the candor that he showed in our interview, because again, didn't have to do it, right? This isn't a hit on ESPN, who owns the CFP. You know, that isn't that. So I really appreciated that. Question number two was that again?
Question number two was just like each committee.
Oh yeah, I got it. Why do they rotate? Yeah. Well, I think it's a bear. You know, like I've met with numerous members of the committee, and I've gone in there respective offices, and they've showed me, I mean, from Pat Hayden to, members that have recently been on the committee, whether it's Rob Mullins or Rick George, Mark Harlan is on it now, like athletic directors at schools that have been in the Pac-12. It's amazing the amount of games they watch. I mean, they are spending their Saturday with their respective team, Sunday watching every game, hopping on a plane. Like, they get after it. They really do. It is a full-time job. I wish they got paid a little bit. Like, just give them a stipend, like something. Yeah. Coaches get bonuses for winning 6 games and going to a whatever bowl. Like, these people should all get $50,000. Like, with all the money we're talking about, in my humble opinion, like, it's just the right thing to do. I think is to take care of these people just a little bit. Like, give them some vacation money, college fund money for their kids, like whatever it is. So on behalf of the committee members, I want you to get paid. I think why do they rotate is because it's only 3 years.
So it's not even a why they rotate. It's just more.
But does it change the cadence?
It's like, how does each committee stay consistent but also make that committee their own?
Well, they don't. I mean, they don't stay consistent. I think when you just look at the history of, like, how a conference championship was viewed and not viewed. True. Like, look at TCU and Baylor, what happened back in the day. Look at the quarterback thing. There's an Ohio State example. Well, yes, they drill Wisconsin in, I think, 2014 to eventually beat your Oregon Ducks in the Natty with the third-string quarterback. Different than Florida State this year. So I think it's fair to say that the mission doesn't change, but the personalities do. And I think that's, like, the thing we all just have to accept, right? Like, all 13 members aren't going to think alike, and that's good. They're all not going to think like I think, or like the 2 people. I've said this many times in this show. I had one of the greatest honors of my career, TJ, is being a part of the Pac-12 with former Commissioner Larry Scott, George Kliavkoff, Merton Hanks, Jim Thornby and company, and present to 2 committee members every year on behalf of the league. I've been doing it for, I think, 4 or 5 seasons now. And it's awesome. So we try to get them to think like us. And then what do they do when they internalize it as individuals? And then how do they kick that information out to 11 other people in the room? I have no idea. Yeah. Right. So the consistency is never going to be in lockstep. I kind of liken it to the air raid. You've got The Godfather and, like, Hal Mummy, and then Mike Leach. But all the way over here is Cliff Kingsbury and Lincoln Riley and Graham Harrell. And, like, there's different variations of what this system is. I think the same thing with the CFP. And I think that's okay. Like, we can't ask people to be like, well, the committee 3 years ago felt like this about this. Contextual purposes is fine. So that's answer to 2. And then 3 was, I don't know if, I hope that Bill Hancock was accurate. Of, he didn't think that the hatred, the threats, the social media, the attorney general, like all that stuff, I don't think makes being on the committee very appealing. I do think that if you're a guardian of the game, like we try to be in college football, it does make you flex a little bit and say, like, get me in that room. Yeah. Like, I'll say this, I'd love to be in that room. And I think there should be an analyst or 2 currently in that room that is on the road every week. Now, it's hard because, Herb Street kind of sees the country, but next year won't because ESPN doesn't have a Big Ten game. In terms of intimacy of talking to staffs, he'd be a great voice. Joel Klatt, he will never call a game in the SEC other than a non-conference game like he's done with Texas and Bama, I guess 2 seasons ago now. Me, I'm just on the West Coast. We'll see what shakes out in the coming year. But I think it'd be nice to have a couple of those voices, even if it was 1 per region. But that's why that doesn't exist now. So I'd be curious, like in this era of vitriol, of screaming, of politicizing. This show is not political by any stretch of the imagination. But let's not ignore that every politician on whatever side they sit on will find an opportunity to stand up for its people and lean into it.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about the state of Florida. Like, that's exactly what is happening. And I agree. I am one of those that think Florida State should have gotten in. Because what else could they have done? And I think to Bill's point, like he said, the committee looks at the totality. And I was like, well, they have a better record against the conference that got in ahead of them. And he also says we look at the immediate, and we didn't forget the Auburn game. Like, it's just so tough. And that's where you have to, and my advice to the listener is like, we have to empathize and trust and give the benefit of the doubt to the people in the room.
Yeah.
And that's what allows me to like sleep and not tweet all night, is like, these people are volunteering their time to spend, X amount of weeks in, the greater Dallas area, and X amount of Sundays, Mondays in the first half of the season dedicated to the craft. Like, we got to just trust the process a little bit, even if we don't like it, even if we think it's broken, whatever. Like, it is the process.
True. That's true. No, I agree. And I'm with you. I also think Florida State should have been in. And one question that you mentioned to him, and I don't think there was enough conversation around it, was how in their championship game is their third string quarterback, because their second string was out with a concussion. One would assume a month later, the second string quarterback, who looked very good when he played,
totally
would have been in. So I'm curious if they discussed that at all. But you're right. You have to lean on trust that they did the best they could, and they made the decision that they thought was best. That being said, I'm starting the petition now. Yogi Roth on the next CFP committee.
Let's go.
Get it going. I'm here for it. Question for you after as we wrap up here is just like, you obviously did the interview. Like, what stood out to you from what Bill said? What do you wish you could have asked in one other question or something like that?
So what stood out to me was probably nothing that will trend from this show, but the reminder that, they see themselves as an event.
Yeah.
That they're hired by these conference commissioners plus Notre Dame. And their job is to serve them. But their reality is that they're greater than an event. And Bill Hancock referenced that at the end of like, we have a voice in the greater growth of college football, and we could have a bigger seat at the table. And I think they should. I think the executive director of college football should just be the de facto president of college football. Because when you look at those 10 commissioners, yes, their job is to their 14, 16, 18 constituents, right? Their schools and their respective league, ACC, Big 12, Big 10, SEC. Yes, that is true. But they also serve the game. And I don't think we can ignore or be ignorant to the fact that like this game is dramatically shifting from what it was when Bill Hancock started in 2012 at the CFP or ran the BCS or was in the Big Eight. Like, it is not an NCAA championship, and it looks dramatically different than any NCAA sport on every level, especially in the offseason as roster management continues to grow and NIL continues to be a factor and media rights take apart conferences like the Pac-12. We just have to look at it like that. And I've always said this from day one, is the inequities in every respective power conference is too dramatic to have any semblance of consistency. Right? Let's talk inequities around scheduling.
Yeah.
Inequities around TV deal. And I get it, like, well, then just be better. Or I understand that. But if we're trying to evaluate everybody the same, how on this planet can that happen when there's so many differences among the teams at the top? I mean, it just is.
Yeah.
It just is. I mean, we have these new leagues and they're great, but do you know how many years it's going to be before UCLA plays Ohio State in the Big Ten? I believe it's going to be 6 years. Like, do you know how many times Georgia and Bama played in the regular season outside of 2020 in the last decade? Once. Like, there's just inequities, right? Whereas UW and Oregon, they all have to play each other down the stretch.
Yep. I agree.
And the response might be, well, then as the conference commissioner, change it. And I sadly have always agreed with that. I always felt the Pac-12 should have gone to 8 conference games. I thought the Pac-12 should have given teams easier paths to the playoff because in a 14 playoff at the time with 5 power conferences, the only thing that really mattered in recruiting was 1, get me to the playoff, and 2, get me to the league. And now it's, can I get paid?
Yeah.
So there was always a league out. And this is the first year where we felt that in the final year of a league being out and excluded, even though I think they earned their way into the discussion. As Bill said, there were 7 teams in the discussion come that Saturday. So yeah, that to me is like a major problem with the sport. 12 teams in will change the fact that like no power conference can complain because they're all going to get in,
Yeah.
but it will not impact the inequities. And that's why what I believe, and I'll just put a button on it here, what I believe college football needs to do is have someone be the executive director, whatever you want to call it, commissioner, whatever, of college football, and bundle these Power 5 leagues, or, and to me, it's like whatever on the leagues, it's more about bundle the teams and say, okay, this is college football. And I think it was Chip Kelly who said it earlier in the season of like, and then create your divisions. Because right now in these leagues, the best teams aren't going to play each other.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a world where if you take, let's just say the Big Ten, right? Which is an awesome league. Oh my God, history. Now I think these 4 teams coming in make the Big Ten phenomenal. I think it's the strongest league in the country. That's my take. And with that said, let's just say 4 teams get into the playoff next year in a 12-team expanded playoff, which is a possibility. I think it'd be a little aggressive, but it is a possibility. There's a world where like 2 of those 4 never played each other.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
in the regular season, and then may never play each other in the playoff, pending where they're slotted. Like that to me is a problem. Whereas if you look at like the NFL model, the regional teams will still play each other, right? That's why it's the NFC West, and on and so on and so forth. And I wonder, when Bill and I hang out in 5 or 6 years at the beach and go for a walk, what do we think about all these conferences? Like, does the logo of the SEC really matter as much as it does now when there's 5 Power 5 leagues competing for 4 spots? Or is it just about the brands of the teams? And that's why I think if I'm the commissioners of these leagues and I am the power brokers, I want to see that a couple steps ahead and say, all right, let me get ahead of this thing. And whether it's Big Ten, SEC, you guys run college football, go ahead, figure it out as the biggest power brokers, players, managers of all these teams. Go run this thing, because I think the brand equity of the leagues, I'm curious how it looks in a couple years. Because the brand equity of USC, Michigan, Ohio State is only going to shoot through the roof because they're going to get to the playoff. Like the Big Ten isn't going to get to the playoff. The SEC is not going to get to the playoff. And now, as we sit today, saying goodbye to this 14 playoff, like the leagues got to the playoff as well as the teams. So it'll be amazing. And I've always said this from the beginning of realignment, man. Our job is to, or my choice will be to enjoy it, and be entertained along the way versus be screaming and yelling along the way. We got enough of that. You can just Google and figure that out. That's all over the internet. But that's hopefully why people come to this show. So an extended Afterglow. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed this YouTube channel. Hope you enjoyed the content. We're not slowing down, even though the Pac-12 is adjusting and these teams will not play each other for the most part, at least over the course of the next couple of years as we know it. But the pod isn't stopping, TJ. Pod isn't stopping.
We rolling.
We rolling, baby. There we go. There it is. Extended CFP deep dive with Bill Hancock and some good Afterglow. Peace.